Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 85 of Two Goalies, One Mic. I'm Johnny Cullen, joined alongside Duane Steinell. As always, we have a repeat guest and a friend of the program, Chris Peters. You can find his work on Hockey Sense on Substack and dailyfaceoff.com. Chris, it's been a few months since we've had you on. I'm really happy to see how you've transitioned into your new work and what a time it is in the hockey world. A lot going on with the Olympics that we'll get to, and also right in the thick of the NHL schedule, the college schedule, everything from prospects to Olympics. Excited to have you back on, bro.
Yeah, it's good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. It's been a while, but always a pleasure. And yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I think with the Olympics, it's crazy. We just got games stacked on top of games. Unfortunately, some of them are overnight, but yeah, we're ruining sleep schedules and enjoying the game. So it's not so bad.
Yeah. Last time we had you on, Chris, we were talking about beach hockey and a very awkward and scary interview with Paul Valbury at NHL Cool Shot. So it's been a minute. But I still cringe.
That was great. That video of Valbury was great.
That was so cringeworthy. Just like what he asked you is like he taught her to say "you are beautiful" in Russian. He just like awkwardly hitting on her in the middle of an interview.
She had no idea.
Shoot your shot, I guess. That's what he does. Yeah. It's probably.
But no, I appreciate you coming on with us. I guess coming on with us again, Chris. As you said, right in the thick of it, Cully, with the Olympics, NHL, college. I know. Michigan just won the battle of I think it's the Battle of the D with Michigan State. I believe it was last night or the night before. Without having Owen Power, Brisson, Kent Johnson and Matty Beniers. So a couple of clicks for them. Obviously Buffalo has some stock in that team with both Portillo and Power, first overall pick, and then just a lot to get into. Team USA. About to have a rematch in the women's tournament with Canada after they beat Finland this morning. I believe it was 5-1. Saw Hillary Knight take over second place in all-time Olympic women's scoring. And Abby Rock becoming the first Indigenous woman to score a point at the Olympics, which is pretty exciting for Team USA. So just a lot to cover, Chris, and I appreciate you coming on with us.
Yeah, no, it's great. And yeah, it's been especially with the men's and the women's tournaments overlapping now where, we've gotten into the women started first, the men get in there. And then it's just like, gosh, your head kind of starts spinning with all the hockey going on over in Beijing. And then not only that, you still got the NHL going here. You got college hockey, as you mentioned. And it's just, the Bean Pot is tonight as well as we were recording this. So, we've got all kinds of stuff. And the Bean Pot's crazy because all four teams have lost players to the Olympics too. So this is the men's Bean Pot, the women's Bean Pot already over. And that was the same deal. They had women missing for the Olympics as well. So it's been a strange year, but I think it's just great that we're getting a chance to have this level of hockey available to us right now, in addition to the NHL.
I have one question for you. If you're Northeastern's coach, how pissed off do you got to be that Devon Levi, and we're biased because we're Sabres fans, He's had a tremendous season. He gets called up, and you're missing him for your back-to-back-to-back run in the Bean Pot, if I'm not mistaken. That's got to be a kick in the pants because he's been carrying that team on his back the whole season. Not to take away from anybody else, Northeastern has assembled quite a hockey team. But to lose your starting goalie going into the tournament of tournaments and the hockey mecca, maybe hockey mecca too of the states, New England, that's a very prestigious tournament, and to not have your starting goalie, I know they're not the only team affected, but what do you think that'll have an effect on them, and any chance that we'll see Canada, U.S. in the finals? Do you think they go back with Pasquale, or do you think we see Devon Levi? What are your thoughts there?
Boy, I wish I knew what Canada was doing with their goaltending situation. It was pretty clear that Pasquale was their guy going into the tournament, and then he didn't have a good game against the U.S. at all.
No, he didn't.
And I mean, 2 goals where you say, okay, you can't allow those. Especially the 4-2 goal that was a backbreaker with Kenny Agostino scoring from distance, and it squirted through. And
the first goal,
the first goal too.
Yep.
I mean, there were not. He didn't have it. And the thing is that, so then they get the game against China. Levi finally dresses. He didn't even dress for the first 2 games. He dresses against China, but he doesn't play. They have Matt Tompkins in, and now they're in a qualification game, and they've got to play China again. If you don't use Devon Levi in this game and don't at least find out what you have, if you're the Canadian coaches, because I think the rest of us that have been watching him for the rest of the year know what he is. He's quite frankly the best goalie on their team.
100%.
I agree.
And they haven't used him. If you don't do it in this qualification round and you go into these elimination games where there is a greater chance of you getting bounced, then I think you're in real trouble. So the Chinese team also, they've actually played pretty tough. They hit, and it's the Kunlun Red Star. It's not really Team China. Most of the guys on the team are from North America. You've got Spencer and Parker Fu, you've got Brandon Yip, but then you've got Jake Chelios and Ethan Werrick and all these other players that
I played with Werrick.
Exactly. So, and I mean, some like Jeremy Smith was the U.S. World Junior goalie one year. So, it's just kind of
got traded for him too.
See, it all comes back to Cully. It all comes back to him. But the thing about it is Levi, and to answer your first question, if I'm Jerry Keefe, the head coach of Northeastern, I am furious that, that he's not getting this opportunity because you let him go with the understanding that he's got a chance to compete for the starting job. Now, I don't know what Devon Levi looked like in practice over in Beijing, but I know that over 24 games this year, he has a .948 save percentage. He's got 9 shutouts. He's having a historic season, a Hobie Baker caliber season. He interrupts that to go to join Canada. And I'm sure, you can't guarantee. If I'm a team, I'm not going to guarantee anything to anybody because there was so much that you didn't know going into the Olympics. And Pasquale has been a top goalie in the KHL for the last couple of years. Tompkins has played well internationally and has AHL experience. But you look at what Levi has done, and really with the exception, he did have 3 losses in his last 4 games before the Olympics, where his numbers definitely did dip. I mean, he was up over like a 955 before that. So this is if you want to play the hot hand, you want to play a guy that can play, he's the guy. And then not only that, but Hockey Canada's brass, the people that run the national teams are the same people that saw him at the 2021 World Juniors, have the best, literally the best performance by a Canadian goaltender in terms of numbers in the history of that tournament. And we're talking better than Carey Price, who is the next guy after him in that list. So I am shocked that they didn't at least give him one of the pre-tournament games or one of the preliminary round games. It
is shocking, man. Especially, I remember him and Spencer Knight put on a show in that tournament in terms of goaltending. It was exciting to watch. So the most exciting hockey I've actually watched, in quite a few years. I mean, internationally at least, that was such a fun tournament to watch. Being a goaltender, watching just the stellar performances put on by Knight and Levi. And when you said historic year he's having, if you look at the numbers, you put them side by side, they are eerily close, at least before those 3 games you spoke of, close to what Ryan Miller did for Michigan State the year he won the Hobie Baker, back as a Buffalo Sabres draft pick. It's eerily close.
Yeah, it was very close. I mean, I wrote about it right at the time where it was like, so if you want to blame anybody, blame me for when he had his little swoon there, that he hadn't had a stretch like that all season. But I mean, like, it was almost identical to the numbers in terms of save percentage, goals against average, and shutouts. So this is it's been a remarkable run. And the other thing about Levi too is that Northeastern is a good team. They're solid defensively, but they're not like Dryden McKay, who's the goalie for Minnesota State, might see 15 shots in a game. Like if he's lucky. Honestly, like, they're giving up about an average of just under 20 shots a game. So, so that's, he's not seeing as much. His numbers are as much predicated by the system that his team plays as he does. And obviously you still got to stop pucks, which he does. But Devin Levi's seeing a different level. So for me, it's been tough to especially when he was not even dressed for the games, not even a backup for the games.
Didn't make any sense.
Do they not know? Like, do they just not know what he's doing? And you've got two guys that are on the back ends of their career and had their chance, and now you've got a guy that I think is going to play NHL games and probably quite a few NHL games, and has I wouldn't have said this a year ago or 2 years ago rather that he has starter potential, but I mean, you look at what he's done, and I'd say, well, he looks like he could be a starter. He's played
that
good.
That way. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. There's a lot of hype around him right now.
Yeah,
and deservedly so.
What Chris said, he's played his way into that conversation. And my only problem with it, as an American fan too, is Eddie Pasquale played against him for 3 years. He was always good, but he was never great, right? And what we saw Levi do at the World Juniors was great. Right. And in these games, in these one-off games now where, they're playing in the qualifying against China in the qualifications, not only not the quarterfinals, the qualifications, right? That's not usually where Canada sits. You got USA, the Russian Olympic Committee, Finland, and Sweden, and you think, who's missing out of that group that gets a bye? And it's, maybe the best hockey playing country on earth. And you got to think part of that has to do with their goaltending. You knew they were coming out thinking that game against USA was going to decide a lot in the group of death, I call it, in that first A group. But yeah, it's a head scratcher for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you were going to bring him over for just the experience, maybe wait for the men's world championship when he's not missing important games, right?
Yep.
Right.
When you're looking for what's best for his development, I think playing in a Beanpot tournament, which would be his first, right? Because he's a freshman.
Yeah, correct.
Yep. He would be his first one.
I don't know. It's a head scratcher for me for sure. And I think not even just rooting for Canada, but I want to see them in the finals, right? I want, and I think that he gives them the best chance. That's all I got.
I'm looking here at the schedule too. They have a matchup, like you said, against China, which I want to say only beat them 5-0, but like Chris says, this isn't like your normal team from China. Like they have a lot of North American hockey players playing for them, and they're putting up a fight, And I'm assuming that Levi have they announced who's going to be starting that game yet? I apologize if I missed that.
No, we don't know. But I mean, that's the thing. Now you're in an elimination game, and I think you can feel pretty confident against China. Like, I feel like they're clearly the least threatening team in this entire tournament, just because they've only scored a couple of goals over 3 games. And so if you're not going to use them, and if you're too afraid to use them in an elimination game, then you're not going to use them at all. And then he just wasted the trip. Now, the thing is that the coaches have to make the decision, right? They have to go with who they feel most comfortable with. But I just feel like there's a lack of familiarity with how good Devin Levi is. Mm-hmm. And if they find out too late, you're out of the tournament. So,
you think it has to do with his size?
I mean, it certainly could. And that, that's you're looking down your bench and you're saying, hey, we got this young guy. I think it's probably more I don't know if there's enough respect for the college game.
And there should be, because you look at what him and what's his name? Yanav Peretz. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Peretz. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Him, Peretz, and Dryden McKay, like you mentioned earlier, like these guys are having, Mike Richter caliber seasons, right?
Yep.
They should all be on the award watch list. My brother being an alumni of Quinnipiac, to see a guy come in and play the way that he has, that's another freshman too, right? Like, they've done a really good job, the college game, at closing the gap. Hell, when I went through the process of deciding, 10 years ago, I feel like the OHL still had the jump on the USHL in college, but not by a big margin, but by enough of a margin.
No, I think that's fair.
But I think we've seen over the past 10 years, not only more and more guys signing NHL contracts out of college, but more high-end prospects. We're talking first rounders that used to always go to the major junior knowing that they weren't going to stay the 4 years. I think we're seeing more and more of those players come in, play as a true freshman, and then in college, and then go from there. And it's just interesting the way it's all happened. Kudos to the guys at the National Training Development Program for doing what they've been doing, but also just USA Hockey in general. We brought up Spencer Knight not too long ago. Now he's a guy that's, competing with one of the highest paid goalies on the planet, right? And I know, Duane, you're not a huge fan of that.
Yeah, not a huge fan of paying goaltenders that much money.
It's working out this year, though. So he's earning it this year.
Oh, no,
but Cully, to your point too, how about Spencer Knight? He goes from playing at Boston College last year to right into the Panthers, plays regular season games, doesn't lose a single one, gets into his first playoff game, wins that, and then he, and so it just shows that if good players, and this Olympics is proving right now something that I believed in 2018. USA's best players in that tournament were Troy Terry and Ryan Donato. They were by far their best players. Yep. And they were the youngest players on the team, and Jordan Greenway as well. And so they took four total college players, played three of them. Will Borgen was also on that team, but he didn't play. And they were the best players. This time they took over half their roster as college players. And the U.S. is the only team that made it through the preliminary round with 3 regulation wins. They got 9 of a possible 9 points. They have the number 1 overall seed. They have the bye, and now they have home. They're the home team in every game they play. They get last change in every game they play. So,
and that is, can we talk a little bit about, for the fans that don't realize how important that is? And I know it was more important on the big ice, but they're playing in the NHL ice. But being able to line match the rest of the way through is extremely important when it comes from a coaching perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the coaching staff for USA is so well prepared for this too. Like, do you think this coaching staff was put together like 9 weeks ago, maybe?
Yep.
And not even. And they have figured out not only how to structure their team properly, but how to prepare. They were ready for everything. And the way that they played against Germany, the way that they played against Canada, there was a preparation there. There was a strategy there, and it was clear. There was the whole game through. It was clear. And so, and as you mentioned, Cully, now they have the ability to line match. They're going to have great pre-scouts because they have a big staff over there, and they have people that kind of handle that. They brought 2 college coaches, 2 college head coaches interrupting their own season in Brett Larson and Mike Hastings, both head coaches at the college level on teams that have a chance to go all the way this year. They're interrupting their season, and they've made that commitment. I think that the commitment from the staff and from the players, that has been the difference in this whole tournament. And none of these guys knew this opportunity was going to be available to them until barely a month before the Olympics began. It's what has happened so far. And again, it doesn't matter if you lose that quarterfinal game, nobody's going to remember that you went undefeated in the preliminary round. But the way that they've played, they've been the best team. I've watched every single team play. USA, we're talking better than Russia, better than all those other teams, because they're the fastest, and they made a lot of the right decisions when it came to building their roster.
Well, you look at their shooting percentage. They got 15 goals on 114 shots. for a 13% shooting percentage. I mean, that's obviously not sustainable over a long period of time, but they're doing great things. Their penalty kill looked electric against, there was one play in the US-Canada game where obviously rooting for USA, Canada has plenty of chances to get back in it. We see Owen Power just open up his hips, drag the puck across the blue line, and just to see the communication, the switch off on the Team USA PK was electric to see. And I obviously that goes to what you say about the preparation of the coaching staff in such a short period of time. I think that's what makes this situation so unique. And then looking ahead to what we have, you'd like to think that Canada, comes out and beats the Chinese. One interesting qualification game I wanted to pick your brain about: Slovakia versus Germany. Now, Germany's played pretty well. We saw them play USA to a 3-2 game, but Slovakia is no slouch either. They've done a really good job over the past couple of years. I think it was you that told us, last time we had you on, that they've kind of rebuilt how they've done their, worked with their prospects, and we're starting to see more and more Slovaks get drafted. Who do you have in that game?
It's tough. I mean, I think I'd probably give a slight lean to Slovakia just because they have the depth. Now, they lost big to Finland and lost big to Sweden. 6-2 to Finland, 4-1 to Sweden, but then they beat up on Latvia. And Latvia actually has a pretty good team. They have, some former NHLers. They have good goaltending.
Former teammate of mine, Andrus Terens.
So we've got so Slovakia is really good. The thing is that Germany is so disciplined. They are physical. They are, the U.S. had to work for everything they got in their game. The scoreline ended up looking closer than the game actually was. I think that they managed to get that one back. And but I do think that Slovakia, that's a team you don't want to let get hot. Right now, they're being led by a 17-year-old, Juraj Slafkovský, who's going to be a top 10 pick in this year's draft. He has four goals so far in the tournament. And going into the game against Slovakia or against Latvia, he had all the goals for his team. They didn't have nobody else that scored. But there are other guys on that roster like Peter Cehlarik, so that if they get hot, they have a chance to do something special. So that's a team that I would be concerned about too, even if I'm the U.S. and just because they do have a higher level of skill. But that's the thing where I think whether it's Slovakia or Germany, I think the U.S. will be favored in that game, and I think they match up well with both. But I mean that is to me the premier qualification game. But I think there are some real interest. Denmark gets Latvia, you get Czechs versus Swiss, and then Canada versus China, which we expect. I think the other ones are toss-ups really, and Denmark that's another team where it's like they might be this year's Germany, where Germany went on the run in 2018 when they won the silver medal. Yep. Denmark's got the goaltending. Sebastian Dahm and Frederick Dachau have been the two guys for them. They've played really well. And then you look at like Michael Bodker, who has been awesome in the tournament. I've liked the way that he's played. They have a bunch of other guys that have experience, NHL experience, Nicholas Jensen and some others. And so they're actually a pretty quick team, and they'll be a tough out.
You mentioned the goaltending for Denmark, Chris, and outside of the USA, their combined save percentages is a 94-2, and their goals against is a 2.02, right? Overall sitting just behind the US, and then comes Canada. But going back to the German team, between Tobias Reiter, Tom Kuhnackel,
Toby Reeder,
and Cahoon, you have a lot of players that have recently been in the NHL. And like you said, it's just going to be a fun couple nights of hockey. It's a shame that the Beanpot falls among this, right? I wish we had more time to watch, because I haven't even been able to catch up with all of the Sabres games. And Duane does a great job holding the ship there, holding the fort there. Pardon my French. But it's been fun to see the Olympics. I had a question for you. One of our guests or one of our listeners asked me why isn't it on the NHL or the Olympic rink surface. Why is this tournament being played in the NHL surface? Is it because the Beijing rink was built for KHL specs?
No, so actually, here's what it is. I mean, basically, the IIHF has made the decision to move to NHL surfaces going forward. So if you want to host a World Championship, you got to host it on an NHL surface. And I'm not sure exactly when that starts, but like in Finland, there are a lot of hybrid rinks. There are a lot of Finland and Sweden have some more hybrid rinks. I think those might fly. But they are what they want to move away from the Olympic size sheets. The game, as they've discovered, and as everyone, especially as the game has gotten faster, if you put it on the bigger ice, it slows it down and it clogs it up, and it makes it, we used to think it was such free flowing. And I think when the Soviets were playing, it was like, when they could just go up and down the ice and just dominate it. But teams got so good, like you look at the Finlands of the world, and they just collapse down between the dots, and then there's nothing there for anybody to shoot at, and then you're just playing from the perimeter the whole game, and it slows everything down. So the IIHF has made that determination that they want to go to NHL sheets. They basically said that this was going to be the first Olympics where it was going to be required. So going forward, when the next Winter Olympics is in Italy, they'll have NHL sheets as well. So I think part of it is that the IIHF wants to see the game become more uniform across the world. You're and especially in their international tournaments, and the quality of the games. You look at what was the best Olympics ever. 2010 was the best. It was on. It was on an NHL,
right?
By far the best. Because even going back to Salt Lake City was on an Olympic sheet. So 2010 was the elite of the elite, and it was the fastest, most entertaining Olympics, I think. I think they realized that from there.
2010, that was U.S. Canada gold medal game.
It was, yes, yeah. So one of the greatest Olympic games in the history of the tournament.
And keep in mind, and I know they brought this up on the broadcast, the U.S. beat Canada in that Olympics
leading into that game.
Full play.
Yeah,
right. And I know it's crazy to draw comparisons about two different teams that don't have any of the same players, right? Or at least Eric Stahl, he was there, right?
Yeah, he was there. Yeah, that's right.
But outside of that, people trying to compare that to this. I mean, hey, it's a 60-minute game. Anything can happen. I like to see that the U.S. has put themselves in the best possible spot going forward. Wanted to pick your brain about one other thing outside of, the U.S., and Canada, like we've talked about. Who presents the biggest challenge? Is it Sweden? Is it Finland? Is it ROC? Is it an underdog in Denmark or Germany? Who do you see, making that path? And I know it depends a lot on seeding and who wins what in the quarters and semis. But who do you ultimately seeing as the Final Four?
Well, it's going to be tough. I think I think Canada has got a good chance against Sweden. I don't love Sweden's roster. I think that they have some good. They've played better than I thought they would. But if Canada beats China, they have to play Sweden in the quarters. That's going to be a tough matchup for them. So that'll be interesting. I think ROC. I mean, as the defending gold medalist, this is not the same team. The team from 2018 was way better. Way better. Datsuk, Kovalchuk. But then they also had Kaprizov and Gusev. Gusev when Gusev was Gusev. He's not anymore.
And Kaprizov, that was the year before he came over, no?
A couple of years, yeah. So I think he still had
out party.
He still had a couple. He still had two. I think he still had 2 years in the KHL. And I was telling anybody that would listen, I was like, this is the guy. Like, he is the guy. He is going to
put
be
the hockey world on notice.
And he did, and he both he and Gusev were awesome in that tournament, and outplayed Datsuk and Kovalchuk. They were the difference makers for that team. But the thing is, the one thing about Finland is the most difficult team to play against, because most of these guys have played together in multiple settings. They won a world championship without NHL players when there were NHL players in the Worlds. This was 2 years ago. Or 3 years ago. And a lot of those guys are on this team. I do think that they have a little less skill than they need to have, which is why ROC is probably still, even though I think that the U.S. matches up extremely well with them, that'd still be tough. So, yeah, but I would say I still think, to me, the most cohesive team, the team that I think could present the biggest problems, is probably Finland, just because of their structure and their experience, and they have a great coach in Jukka Jalonen, who I think really could be one of those European coaches that NHL teams should be talking to, because he gets the most out of his teams every single time out. And so I do think Finland is a big threat to win gold here.
I have to agree.
Go ahead, Duane.
Am I Cully, he has so many questions. I love it. No, one thing actually, before I ask my question, one thing I want to just breaking news from Darren Drager. Flames and Canadians working out a trade to send Tyler Toffoli, nemesis of Jonathan Cullen over there, to the Calgary Flames. No return really reported on yet. I'd imagine it'd probably be like picks or prospects, but that coming down from Darren Drager right now. Toffoli to Calgary imminent. But one thing I did want to ask you, and I do agree, Finland's probably the biggest threat to the U.S. or Canada, to get, for that gold medal game. But there's a lot of players, as Cully mentioned before, guys like Tobias Rieder, Dominic Cahoon, and a guy that has some Buffalo ties that both me and Cully, Kenny Agostino. These guys are performing very well in this tournament, guys who were on NHL contracts last year. I mean, I'm interested to see if their performance in this tournament maybe gets them a ticket back into the NHL next year. I mean, your just thoughts on that, because this is obviously we were talking about opportunities. This is a very good opportunity for some of these kids to really get given an opportunity they normally wouldn't have. Given the circumstances with the NHL and them not allowing the players to come over in the Olympics, the opportunity they normally wouldn't have to perform on this stage, maybe get a job in the NHL or at least in the AHL.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly the potential for some of those guys to have another look. I mean, I think that more than likely NHL teams are going to use those contracts on younger free agents. Just because of the contract limits, I think it'd be really difficult for guys like a Kenny Agostino, or like Andy Mealy has been one of USA's best players in this tournament, and and certainly the captain. But I mean, just dictating the pace and being a difference maker, playing physically, and but I think that those guys probably wouldn't get offers that are better than what they're getting in the KHL right now, because I think most of them would be like AHL only contracts, and in some cases you could, in some cases you get, and in some cases you just want to come back to the US. So
yeah,
and there are certainly some guys on the Russian team that are like free agents that people will be looking at, and I think a few of the European players. I haven't seen necessarily anyone on North America on the North American teams that would be able to seize an NHL contract off of their performance here. Though I would say one other guy that I think has been exceptional is Steven Campher, who has, been a big minutes guy for USA, and I think looks like an NHL defenseman in this tournament. But it's, I think, but then you look at like there are free agents on USA that are young guys like Ben Myers. Like Ben Myers is going to have 25 NHL teams that want to sign him after his college season is over. And, Mark McLaughlin will have not as many, but he'll have teams that want to sign him. And, even Strauss-Mann, the free agent goalie, had a great year. So
I would love to see Buffalo take a flyer on Strauss-Mann, former Michigan goaltender. He was a captain for Michigan too. Kind of abruptly left the program, to go pursue a professional career over in Europe. But guys had a phenomenal year over there, and had a phenomenal year, career at Michigan before he decided to leave. And a team like Buffalo, who is struggling to find consistency in net and dealing with so many injuries, I wouldn't mind seeing Buffalo take a flyer on that guy.
Yeah, I think if I'm NHL, especially with the way that the goaltending has kind of been in flux this year, and I'll tell you one thing. So we saw Zane McIntyre got signed by the Minnesota Wild earlier this year, right before the Olympics. Actually, had he not signed, he would have been USA's goalie at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Every indication that I've heard from multiple sources say that he would have been. So, but that just goes to show you that there was such a desperate need for goalies that teams are, signing guys that were kind of out of the loop, or, and McIntyre was on an AHL only deal. So McIntyre comes in and, but guys like that, I think like Strauss-Mann is the kind of guy where he's won at every level he's been at. He's been an elite goalie. He's not big. He's not as technically sound as like you watch Drew Commesso play and you watch Strauss-Mann play in back-to-back games, and you say, okay, well, Commesso looks like an NHL goalie. Strauss-Mann, not as much, but he is. But you look at his track record. He won a Clark Cup in the USHL. He had a .930 save percentage or greater in his last 2 collegiate seasons. He already has a .921 in the games in the SHL. So that is a very interesting player that I think teams wanted to see do it at the pro level. There's a reason he didn't get an NHL contract last year. They didn't believe that he could do it, even though he's proven it at multiple levels before. And now he's doing it at the professional level. So I would be stunned if he doesn't at least get an AHL contract out of this season. But I do think there will be some teams that could offer him a two-way.
I wanted to pivot really quickly to the women's final.
Sure.
Coming up, I believe it's Wednesday night, 11 p.m., which is doable. Not thrilled about it for us parents out there that have to wake up at 5:30. One question I had for you. Coming in, I was a big Madison Rooney fan after seeing her heroics in the shootout last time around. I know that she didn't, not to say that she didn't have a good game. I don't think she's the reason they lost. I think you take away that 3 or 4 minute lapse where Canada got 3 quick goals, right? But Cavallini, I hope I'm saying that right.
Yep.
She's been given a nod, and she came up big against the Czechs. And then the semifinals against Finland, she went 25 out of 26 for a .961 save percentage. And when you put her 2 games together, she's at a .954. You got to think that she at least has the edge over Rooney, right? Or do they go back to their golden girl in Madison Rooney? To me, it doesn't make sense. I think you stick with the hot hand. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that I think they kind of went in with an idea that it could be Cavallini that would be the starter. And then, they gave Rooney a couple games and she looked pretty good. And really in the preliminary round, they played all 3 of their goaltenders. Nicole Hensley also got an opportunity. And, the thing is that I think that nobody is playing at the level that Maddie Rooney did in 2018. But Cavallini is probably the closest to it. And she also was kind of she was on the team in 2018, but didn't play at all. And so she's getting this opportunity. She's older than Rooney. She's been around a lot longer. She's been part of this process. Even going back, she was drafted by the Chicago Steel in the USHL. So that's going way back, but, and when her last name was Rigsby. But now married to I think it's Aiden Cavallini who played at Wisconsin, and they both played at Wisconsin. But she's a gamer. She's been through it. That experience, I think, helps. Rooney got the game against Canada, didn't go so well. I think that this is going to be, Alex Cavallini's net, and that she's going to need to have the game of her life because I'll be completely honest with you that this Canadian team on paper in every game I've watched is so far and away the best team in this tournament. They have more speed, they have more strength, and they certainly have more skill. And you look at the way that they've scored, the dominance that they've shown against the weaker teams, and then also even, USA outshot Canada in the preliminary round game pretty significantly, almost 2-1. And Canada has better finish. They get to the middle better. They have more weapons overall. And so that puts a lot of stress on the goaltender. And Alex Cavallini is absolutely capable of stealing a game. I think she's going to have to steal a game in this gold medal game if USA is going to win it, because we've watched all these games that they played. I still haven't seen one where I said they've They're on it like they were in 2018.
The Canadians first in scoring efficiency, first in power play, second in penalty kill, second in save percentage, and that's where it leads me to I hope I pronounced this right. And Renee Debian, she looked great in that win against the U.S. She's got a 1.75 goals against average. She's got 4 wins, a 936 save percentage. Like she's been great. When I saw her play, you'd have to think that she's in net for the gold medal game. Your thoughts there? Who has the edge in pipes?
I mean, Canada, and Debian has been awesome. She didn't have a great game. I watched the semifinal against Switzerland. She let in some goals where she was down a little early, and Switzerland caught her up top. But Debian, she is legit. She was an elite college goalie. She has been, kind of the go-to goalie for them in the last few years. And now she's a 94, so she's been around and she's been waiting for this opportunity. And so 27 years old, she gets the opportunity to be the starter. She's been behind Shannon Zabados for years and years. And now she gets this chance. And, she went undefeated at the World Championship last year, won the gold medal. She's got that 936 save percentage, as you mentioned, this year. She was lights out in the pre-tournament games against the U.S. She has the experience. She has the polish, and that is certainly, to me, an advantage for Canada going into this gold medal game. Is that of the 2 goalies, she's great. Yeah.
7 out of the top 8 scorers for the women's hockey tournament are Canadians, and all 7 of those players have above 10 points. That's scary to look at.
Scary.
They take over from Sarah Nurse to Marie-Philippe Poulin to Natalie Spooner to Brianne Jenner to Claire Thompson to Sarah Fillier, and then you have Rebecca Johnson rounding it out. Like, that's the depth you're referring to, and to me, like that's a win by committee team.
Yes.
You can put whoever you want in net, but when you have that group in front of you, you saw the resiliency. It looked like America came out to a hot start, but then they just slowly wore them down, and you saw the skill shine through. It's going to be tough for the U.S. women to pull this out against such a the team's got depth, they got the star power, and the injury. I'm sorry, to the U.S. One of their best players. Her name's blank.
Brianna Decker, yeah.
Brianna Decker, yeah.
Stud player. For her to go down, Duane, that's a big loss for the U.S. Can that be, you hate to say an X factor, be a player that's not playing, but, could that be it? And it may as well be.
Yeah, it could be. And I'll tell you what, here's what the difference is between 2018 and this year, because I think that the 2018 team, it's really shocking to me how much better that team was than this team, and in so many different facets of the game, because you would think that as they get younger and as USA has kind of been a dominant team at the World Championships, the Women's World Under 18s, that the gap would widen. It hasn't, and in fact, it's gone the other way. And so in 2018, there's no Megan Duggan anymore. There's no Lamoureux twins. There's no Casey Bellamy. They are missing some of their most senior players that were stabilizing forces. Then you lose Brianna Decker to injury, and you lose one of your best offensive players. I think she's one of the best players in the world and has been for maybe 15 years. And unfortunately, not able to play. And now, you're back to square one. So this team has really lacked an identity. Like, who is the go-to? Hillary Knight has played really well. Kendall Coyne-Schofield has played really well, but nobody has taken the reins and said, "This is my tournament."
Great ambassadors for the game, for sure. But like you said, that no one's really, stepped in front, and said, I'll put this on my shoulders and I'll carry the load, like a Brianna Decker could have been. It was such a devastating injury too.
Yeah.
You saw the outpouring of support, especially when she posted that one picture of her in the brace, good to see the support. And two things first thing I want to say is there was a writer, and I forget what her name was, but they essentially said that women's hockey shouldn't be at the Olympics because it's always just two teams. Like, first off, excuse language, but fuck off. Like, seriously.
They've done a really good job of making everybody more competitive.
But here's the thing, like, these women, no matter what team you represent, you were working your ass off your entire life just to have the opportunity to represent your country, which is an honor in itself on this stage. Like, no matter what you want to say about the men's tournament and saying the best of the best aren't there because of COVID reasons, but the best of the women are there, and they've worked their entire lives just for this one opportunity. And some of them, this opportunity might only come one time. So to sit there and make such an ignorant statement like that drives me absolutely insane. And the second thing is, it is official. Tyler Toffoli to the Flames, and the return, just give me one moment. The return is a first, a fifth, Emil Heineman, and Tyler Pitlick to Montreal for Tyler Toffoli, which is a huge return. And that is why Johnny Cullen hates Tyler Toffoli right there. The story about that.
Within 2 seconds of this, really quick story. It's Teddy Bear Toss night. It's on a Sportsnet game. You see me. I am trying to fight over the secondary screen. Toffoli's about half a second away from going one teeth chat on me. That was the Sean Monahan, Tyler Toffoli, Shane Prince line. Thank you for putting that up, Duane. Appreciate that. Gotta love to see Cully about to get scored on. That's an interesting return. I want to say it's the same Tyler Pitlick I played with in the Ivan Halinka tournament way back when, originally an Edmonton pick. Could be wrong. Is that sound about right?
Nope, you're right. That's right.
So, he was a good guy. But what's it called? What I was going to get at? Back to the women's really quick. We heard a lot about face-offs in the first game from Abby Rook. Is that how I'm saying it?
Rock.
Yeah, and she is in the top 5 for all face-off leaders. She is 34 out of 54, and I know her numbers have dipped a little bit, but she, it could come down to, Marie-Philippe Poulin is the only Canadian above her, right? You look at the other 2 above her, Elena Mueller from the Swiss and Li Mai from China. I don't think they're going to be threats in the game, but, if the U.S. is to win, it comes down to being able to get possession at those crucial moments to shut down a good power play in the Canadian women's team. Yeah. Duane, I wanted to transition really quick to just pick Chris's brain about the top prospects coming up. And I'll let you go nuts with the NHL.
One last thing real quick. Couple of clicks for Abby Rock becoming the first Indigenous woman to score a point in the Olympics. Absolutely unbelievable, accomplishment, and just really goes to show how far the game's coming. Not just the women's game, but just the game overall. So a couple clicks for her. That's awesome. I know they announced, I think she had a goal today against, was it against Finland? Was it a goal or just an assist?
Goal. She scored an empty netter. Yeah.
Yep. Right at the end. Yeah. And again, Hillary Knight becoming second leading all time in Olympic scoring. Also awesome for her. Passing, I have her name, Natalie Darowitz with 26. So good for her. Absolutely awesome. Team USA all the way, baby.
Pull that out.
Also, yeah, I want to pick your brain on the prospects, but also before if you don't mind, Cully, just the performance of Owen Power.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been interesting. Canada has been able to really even out their ice time, but still Owen Power is the number 1 defenseman. And that's no surprise. He's the best player, most talented player on the team. I think he's been fine. Like, it hasn't, he hasn't been, earth-shatteringly good. He hasn't been bad at all. He's just kind of been fine. And I think that's kind of what you could say for a lot about Canada. He's handling himself well. I think the where you start to notice him is when he's got the puck on his stick on the offensive blue line, and he's walking the line. He's making plays. He's getting pucks deep. He's, and he's doing doing well in that regard. I thought that there have been a couple instances where we've seen him get knocked around a little bit more than normal, because there have been some really physical games, especially against the U.S. That was a game where I did not feel he had his best. He was fine. It wasn't like, he got overwhelmed. It just, the U.S. just made things more difficult on the defense, and that's part of what their speed has done so far in the tournament. But, I mean, you look at what Owen Power has done throughout this entire season, and he's a step ahead of where he was last year. He's progressing in a way that says he's going to be able to make an NHL impact on day one. It's going to, you look at what Moritz Seider has been doing for the Detroit Red Wings. I'm not saying that Owen Power is going to have that similar impact, because Moritz Seider is a year older than Owen Power will be when he gets there. So he's actually had 2 years out post-draft outside of the NHL. Owen's going to have one, but I think he's NHL ready. He should be able to play games this spring as soon as Michigan's season is over, and then, move on from that. So he is certainly on the right track. And I think that, if Canada's going to win, he's going to be a huge part of it. Just as he was at the World Championship last year when they won. So, you can't say enough about him. The skill level and the potential that he has is really special.
There's a desperate need here in Buffalo for another consistent right-handed shot defenseman. Obviously, with him being a left-handed shot, do you see him as a guy? Some defensemen are very versatile like that. Do you see him as being a guy that can play either side if you need him to?
Yeah, I'm sure he could. I think I've seen him play both sides before when they've had a need at Michigan. I think ideally you'd like to be able to play him, especially in his rookie year, on his strong side, and
have that 1-2 punch.
Yeah. So to have him and Dahlin long term, like, I still am a huge Dahlin believer. I think that things are going to get there. It's going to take a little more time, but when he has more help on the back end, I think things could open up for him,
especially in that.
Me and Duane had this conversation, Chris, and as skilled and as talented and as much as Dahlin is a franchise-changing player, he's not what you would think of when you think of the face of the franchise, right? Because he tends to want to stay out of the spotlight. And I think the emergence of Owen Power is only going to help Dahlin in that sense. In the sense that, he's not going to be relied on as heavily, but he's still going to be getting, top 4 minutes, where, now he might be getting more favorable matchups for his offense to leak out. And I think that'll only help. And you're looking at a man in Owen Power. When we interviewed him before the draft, you could just see it in the way that he carried himself, and seeing what he's done since. It's been really interesting to see. So I think that'll help. What your thoughts on that? The emergence of Owen Power, maybe helping Dahlin kind of come into his own more, and not having all the pressure on the back end on him.
Yeah, it helps a lot. I think you look at what happened with Rasmus Ristolainen, and where he was on an island and he had to play so many minutes, and that wasn't best for him. He wanted to play the minutes, but it didn't work. It wasn't good. It wasn't good for him. It certainly wasn't good for the Sabres. And I think he's a guy that was, we talk about prospects not working out so much, and so often it's circumstantial. So often it comes down to what was the development plan? Who was available? Like, how many minutes did they play? What was the opportunity like? So for Rasmus Dahlin, he's kind of been in that similar situation for these last few years. Now the pressure comes off a little bit. And you're exactly right. You get to work those matchups a little bit differently. You don't have to rely on him as heavily. And some guys need to play more minutes to be more effective. Some guys are going to be more effective in lower minutes. We don't know what that's going to be until we see it. But I do think that having another big time defenseman there, a guy that will acquire attention from the other team, even as a rookie, is going to be really good for Rasmus Dahlin, and it's only going to help open things up for him. I still think that he's got a long way to go before he reaches the ceiling.
I agree. And for all the ignorant fans out there that are coming down hard on this kid, he really is still a kid. You got to remember that He
21.
came in as what, a 17, 18-year-old into the NHL?
Yeah.
Right. So he's still growing into the defenseman he'll become. A guy that listed Nick Lindstrom as somebody he'd like to play like, and somebody that he grew up watching. And, it took Nick Lindstrom time. Obviously, he's a specimen. He's a weapon. He might be the best of all time in my era. But, transferring away from that, I know Duane had some questions about the Sabres pipeline. I wanted to quickly ask you, because I know your work in the past with the prospects for the draft. Obviously some shutdowns here and there. This draft has been the Shane Wright sweepstakes for the past 3 years now, or maybe 4, ever since he got exceptional status. He's playing for my, my former team in the Kingston Frontenacs. The second place, I don't want to say the second place, but Matthew Savoy has been somebody from the Winnipeg Ice that's been highly touted. And you go down the list.
Logan Cooley.
Any other names to stick out that you think that are going to be top 5 picks that have a really strong chance of being, NHL first team all pros,
Yeah, I mean, well, I in my midterm draft rankings, I had Logan Cooley number 1 on my list, and it's so thin. Yeah, it's so thin. Like between those two guys, like it took me a long time to get there. I had been on the right train, and I still could get it back on it. It's just, my concern is, we've looked over the years. It was interesting. I actually saw in 32 Thoughts that there was a note about how Shane Wright, like everybody gets picked apart. And the two players that Elliot mentioned in 32 Thoughts were John Tavares and Jason Spezza, 2 guys that were just highly touted for years and years, and they got picked apart. Well, they also aren't the best players in their draft class in their careers. Kovalchuk was, Spezza has the longer career, but Kovalchuk had the more impactful career. And then Tavares versus Hedman has been a debate for years and years. And I think that Hedman is winning that debate at this point with his multiple Norris trophies, Stanley Cups, and everything else. So, but at the same time, Shane Wright is an elite talent. I mean, and the thing about the two of those guys, like Cooley and Wright, is they don't play the same way. Cooley's the more dynamic, quicker player. He has speed. I think he plays the modern NHL game very well. Wright is more of a calculating, hockey sense centered guy who can really shoot the puck. So I really like Logan Cooley. I think that I keep going back and forth even still. I think like right after I filed my draft rankings, Shane Wright had like a 4-assist game, like right off the, like I was like, there it is,
He's reading your articles, Chris.
Exactly. I hope he is. And like, I don't mind being, I'm not somebody that has to be right. Like, if Shane Wright can prove me wrong that I misranked him, then I'm fine with that. And I'll fix that when we get to the end of the season. But I felt at this point of the season, my biggest concern with Shane Wright is he missed an entire year of hockey, and it's showing this year. And it's
showing across the OHL.
It's showing across. You're exactly right, Cully. You're exactly right.
Shame too.
It is, and it's unfortunate that it went that way. But you're looking at guys that missed that year. Now there are some guys that have handled it better. You look at Pavel Mintyukov over in Saginaw. He's been one of the best defensemen in the OHL this year. He's my top defenseman in the OHL ranking wise, and that's over a guy like a Ty Nelson, who was the number 1 overall OHL pick and is a really good player and is having a good season with North Bay. But, that's just where we're at right now with this season, is that, and I think that this year is tougher than last year was. And that's even with guys that didn't play. Like, it was easy when guys didn't play. It's just like, well, we're going to have to go off of the previous season, or we're just going to have to say too big a risk, not going to deal with it. This year, you've got guys that missed last season and aren't playing up to their standard this year. And now you have to say, is that going to continue, or is this a blip in the radar? Did that lost year of development knock Shane Wright off of his trajectory? That's what I want to know. Did it knock any of these other players off of their trajectories? And at this point, I couldn't tell you, because it's unprecedented. We've never seen something like that before. So that's where this draft year is very tricky. There's a lot of good players. Savoy, who you mentioned.
Lambert? I didn't mean to interrupt.
Brad Lambert. I mean, he's not had a good year. He's a guy that I think is full of risk. He is an electric skater. He has good skill. very perimeter player.
Why did he leave his old team?
Well, he wasn't getting the opportunity, and he wasn't getting. He's on his third team in 3 years. Like, I mean, that's a red flag for me.
Cully was on his third team. I played for 4 teams in 4 years.
Well,
that's a major red flag.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like, and it's moves being in Finland. I think it's great that when they have young players, they want to put their young players in the best possible situations. And there's not a lot of oversight, or interference from the national governing body. But in a situation like Brad Lambert, they're saying, you should probably trade him. He's a really important player for our country. We need him to get better. And so he goes to Lahti, which is where he grew up. So that's his home club. That's one of the reasons why he's there. And they're also a more competitive team. However, he made the move over there, in the games that I've seen that he played there, much of the same. So he has tumbled down the draft rankings. I have him outside. He's more in the 15 to 20 range for me right now. And I love the skating. I love the skill. I have questions about the hockey sense, and I have questions about the competitiveness.
He has the
tools. I love that answer.
He has the tools, but there's a question of whether or not he can get them all in the toolbox.
Right, exactly. I mean, and he's another guy where we have these guys where we think about them for years and years, and we never want to move them off of where they're at. And if you aren't critically thinking about those players just as much as you are the guys that weren't on your board that high at the end, then you're not doing it right. So that's where we're at.
Do you see the top two of this draft? Obviously, like you said, Shane Wright, Logan. I'm a big Logan Cooley guy. I love Logan Cooley. Maybe it's my bias for the NTDP program. Coming out of there. Again, I think that Montreal is clearly ahead in predictions to win the draft lottery, and I think that just going based off what the fan base would want, maybe what that organization want, you see them hiring Martin St. Louis as the head coach. I think if they win that, it's Shane Wright, 100 times out of 100.
Going away, no question.
Yeah, especially, I don't see them picking Logan Cooley, which for a team like Buffalo, in Buffalo's case, like maybe a guy like Logan Cooley could fall to you, because I got a feeling Buffalo will be drafting in the top 3, top 5 again this season. And, I don't mind it. This is a year for Buffalo where, it's really about individual development, not about results. And you see a lot of these players for Buffalo that have really outperformed expectations. Your Tage Thompson, who up until a calendar year ago, we all gave up on. Casey Middlestad has really come a long way when he's healthy. I think he's turned into the Buffalo's best 200-foot hockey player down the middle. And Victor Olofsson has dropped off a lot, but Rasmus Dahlin has really turned it around under Don Granato. Jeff Skinner is turning into a 35 goal scorer, plus goal scorer again. Had 4 yesterday, 4 goals yesterday, and
always help the season numbers. The 4-goal games.
Oh yeah, for sure. But he was on pace for 30 even before that, 60-point season. I would have never believed you if you'd have told me Jeff Skinner was on pace for 60 points this season without Jack Eichel. Which is insane to even think of. But he is, and that maybe that is the Don Granato effect. Another guy who came out of the U.S. National Development Program, helping develop young hockey players. But Logan Cooley is a guy I look at. I would salivate at the mouth if Buffalo was in the top 3 and they had an opportunity to draft that kid, because I personally think he is the best player in the draft. And I compare these two players, not maybe side by side the players, but it's a lot like the Lafreniere draft, in my opinion. Everyone had Lafreniere as your clear-cut number 1, and I personally didn't believe that myself. And I would love the opportunity to see them take a Logan Cooley if he were to drop to them at, say, a 2, or probably not going 3, but
yeah, I mean, I think Logan Cooley is on the Jack Hughes path. He's not at that level. He's not at the same, but undersized center with electric skill and skating ability, and that for him, I do think he can still be a number 1 center at that. And that's one of the things where I was like, the dynamic elements of his game make me believe that he could be a more productive player in the NHL. And so that's going to be interesting to watch. But I mean, I think if you get Logan Cooley there, depending on where the Sabres end up, there's also a couple of right shot defensemen out there, and Simon Nemitz and David Juracek, who you could potentially look at as shoring up that right side of the D. And there's going to be good options at the top of this draft. I think in the lottery, you want to be in the lottery, because I think the drop off is significant after that. I think it starts going down. And this is every draft. I mean, it goes down after 2, it goes down after 3, it goes down, so it's just kind of, that's kind of where it goes. And it'll be interesting to see.
The real sweepstakes is the following year for Connor Bedard. That's
big time
sweepstakes.
Yeah. And then if
the
you're
year
willing
after,
to wait,
Musty. No, I'm just kidding. That's Musty's draft. I'm friends with Musty's family. They're right here in Hamburg, New York. I was able to skate with him in the summer and train with his sister, who's an up and coming, Olympic girls goalie prospect. So it'll be interesting to see there. I believe Musty is a part of the Bedard draft, correct?
I think that's right. Yeah. He
went first overall to Sudbury this year, which would make him draft eligible his second year in the OHL. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. He's an 05. Yeah. So he's, and that's, he's a really interesting player, obviously. I think to be an American kid to go high in the OHL draft. And, he's off to a pretty good start to his OHL career as well. And, I mean, there's a lot. I think that the Connor Bedard and then Matvei Michkov and Adam Fantilli, who gets forgotten, but is the Chicago Steel. He's playing for the Chicago Steel in the USHL this year and is putting up historic numbers for a player his age. Probably will go down as one of the most talented players that played in that league outside of the national team development program. So
it's crazy to see what Ryan Hardy's done with the Chicago Steel over the past 4 years, is it not?
Oh yeah, that's why he got hired by the Leafs. Like it's.
Oh, so he's not there anymore. I missed that.
He's with the Maple Leafs now. But he was part of bringing in Fantilli and bringing in those players. And I think that part of it was, there was such an emphasis on development and making sure that it helps when you have a deep pocketed owner too. Larry Robbins, who owns the team, invested money into making that team better and invested in his players, which I think is not common necessarily at that level. They worked with Stride Envy and Daryl Belfry and all these other people that kind of work with the best of the best. And it is definitely shown, and they built some really good teams. Like right now they have Jackson Blake, who's one of the best players in the USHL, drafted by Carolina. And they've got other players, Joe Miller, drafted by the Leafs. It's a good team. It's a really good team, and it's always going to be.
Quick tidbit about that. Daryl Belfry, back in the day before his national, rise to being one of the top skills coaches, he used to do skills clinics right out of Fort Erie. You remember that, Duane? Used to work with Kim Kennedy, and I was lucky enough where, as a 91 birth year, I was able to stay out with the 90s, the 89s, the 88s, the 87s. And when the 88s and 87s, really strong age groups out of Southern Ontario and Buffalo, did a lot for me. And it's funny because Daryl Belfry was a goalie, and now he's one of the, premier skills coach that works with Austin Matthews, that works with all these guys. And I could tell you what an impact he had on me at such a young age. And you could see it. And, back then, him working with a guy like Pat Kane, Pat Kane would have probably been successful no matter what. But to have Daryl Belfry as your skills coach, from when you were 9 to when you left the program, for London at 15, says a lot. My last question is about Ryan Johnson, the University of Minnesota defender. There's been we traded it. No, we still have him. I was at his youth team, Anaheim Junior Ducks. It screwed me up. He won the World Juniors. Okay, it looks like did he win a NCAA title?
No, they won the Big Ten last year. But they're.
I get confused looking at his elite prospect page. Anyways, he's a guy that when we drafted, we knew he would take time to develop. His numbers are starting to come around. He's over 30 games this year, 2 goals, 14 assists, 16 points. and he's a +5. Looks a lot like what he did the year before. But what's his ceiling? Is he somebody that still projects to be an NHL defenseman?
NHL, yes, but I would say bottom pairing probably.
With that.
There's he's a brilliant skater. He's a really good defender. The offensive game has come, but not a lot. And he moves pucks up ice well. I just, it's very difficult to have a guy that's in your top 4 that doesn't produce and doesn't really seem to have like an offensive sense to his game. It's just like, there's not a ton of creativity, but he is a brilliant skater. He's got strength. He's got size. I thought he could have been in the mix for this Olympic team. I thought that there was a possibility just because of his World Junior experience, but defensively, Minnesota this year has struggled. I think that they haven't been as consistent as a team, which is interesting because I thought that coming into the season they were going to have one of the best D-cores in the country. And that hasn't really borne out this year. But that said, I think that he is getting there. Is he? I'm not sure really what the plan is going to be for Buffalo because he's a junior and a lot of guys sign after that 3rd year. He needed the 3rd year. He's progressed a little. I haven't seen him take a gigantic step forward from his you look at some of the guys and it's not fair to compare him to like a Jake Sanderson or an Owen Power who were high draft picks. But even if you look at some of the guys that were kind of drafted later or, a Brock Faber, who is a second round pick, who's on the same team at Minnesota, he's taken a huge step every single year and is a more and he's on the Olympic team now. And he's also playing more minutes than anybody else on the Olympic team. So it's just kind of it when you have those guys to compare to Ryan Johnson, you're like, wow, it's not good there. So I think in the end, he's not the kind of guy that you would normally get with a 1st round pick. But if you get an everyday NHLer out of that at the bottom of the 1st round, I think you don't love it, but you're happy about it because you obviously want to find guys that are going to be big impact players in the 1st round. But take the numbers away. Really, if you take the number away from his name and 31st overall, if he goes that particular year 1 pick later, he's a 2nd round draft pick and the pressure is a lot less. So, so I think it'll be fine for him.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like Ryan Johnson has always been in the conversation with Sabres fans as a guy who you could see possibly being like a good 3rd pairing defenseman, like you said, a penalty killer. Not a guy who's going to give you much offensive upside. A couple guys I did want to ask you before we let you go here. Another Minnesota player, Aaron Hughlin. Obviously, many remember him scoring that highlight goal in the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. He pulled to Michigan. I believe it was against Team Canada.
It was, yeah.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
controversial game where Canada's goal shouldn't have counted.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dylan Cousins, too, I believe, scored the goal. The game winner. Is he the game winner or the game tying goal? But
that was a crazy game.
Matthias Samuelsson, who's made his way onto Buffalo's roster, who's played very well. Big defenseman who, I'm excited to see, further his career in Buffalo. And then Eric Portillo at Michigan, a lot of the talk in Buffalo is Devin Levi, and rightfully so. But if you're asking me to rank my goaltenders here, and he's been on the show with us before too. Eric has. I like Eric's game a little bit more because he has a lot of athleticism, but you just can't teach size. And this kid is huge, and he takes up a lot of net. And I just see him as being a guy. I know he's got like a .920 save percentage, or lower in the 2 goals against. Obviously not to the level of Levi at Northeastern, but just a guy who has really taken the reins after Strauss-Mann has left the program for Europe, and has played very, very well for Michigan this year. Just your thoughts on those guys as well.
Yeah, so let's just start with Hughlin first, because he basically lost an entire year. He had to injury. He was out for the entire 2019-20 season. Only got into 39 games last year with Fargo, so he was still recovering. And this year he's played 28 games. He only has 9 points. Don't look at the point total. Look at the fact that he's playing. He's back. He's a highly skilled player. He's got a lot of time yet to develop. He needs to bulk up. He needs to get stronger. Those are the types of things, but he's got plenty of time to do that. And I think he's a guy that I expect to take a really big step in terms of production and everything next year. His role is going to increase. Highly skilled, highly creative player that I really like quite a bit. Going to Samuelsson, I've always liked Matthias Samuelsson a lot. I think that he has been he's the kind of guy that could have a really long career. He's not going to be a guy that is a star. He's not going to be, he might not even be a fan favorite. He might be a guy that the fans want to pile up on just because he's that steady, reliable defenseman that's physical, doesn't produce a ton. But I think he's a long-term NHL defenseman, a guy that's going to play, and maybe he and Ryan Johnson could play together kind of in the bottom pairing for a long time. But I like him a lot. The aggressiveness that he plays with. Portillo is having a phenomenal year. Michigan has been really good. I think that you never really know for sure what you're going to get when you have a guy that kind of had to sit as an understudy last year behind Strauss-Mann, and he's taken the reins and he's been outstanding. I think the upside is phenomenal. He's an athletic goaltender. He's got that, he's definitely got that size, got the size. He's quick. He doesn't give up a ton of, tough goals. He manages things well.
Makes the save he needs to make, and makes the timely saves too.
Yeah, exactly. So so if Michigan's going to have a chance to win it all, yes, they have all that talent, but they need him to be good, and he's been good enough for them this year to be one of the top teams in the country.
Especially this past week and a half, again, without your Beniers, your Johnson, your Brisson, and of course Owen Power. I mean, they just did a clean sweep of Michigan State, and obviously a big rivalry series. And just, he's really taken the reins and held his own and given them a chance to win every single game without their key players in the lineup.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, sometimes that's all you can ask for, and that's he's progressing too. Like, he's showing development. He's showing, there were times this year where he would get a little scrambly. He would get a little bit out of sorts, or maybe he'd play the puck at the wrong time. You're starting to see him play a much more reserved, and not reserved, but just a more a clean game. He's playing a cleaner game, and he's looked good. So I think he's an outstanding young prospect, a lot of upside. Levi certainly has the numbers and is the guy that I think, has a little more polish and is a little bit better in a couple of different areas. But I mean, you can't have enough goaltending in your system, and they're looking pretty good there.
Well, hey, I have to jet to run a lesson. Chris, really appreciate your time. Can you remind our listeners where they can find your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys. It's always great to be with you. You can find me on Hockey Sense on Substack. It's hockeysense.substack.com. And then also dailyfaceoff.com, where I've had a lot of Olympic recaps, and that's where my draft rankings are and stuff like that. So that's where you can find my work most often. And also my podcast is Talking Hockey Sense, which is available wherever you get this podcast, I would imagine.
Give it a listen, folks. Chris, big thank you to you. Duane, I'm out of here early. I know you got an ad read to do.
Yep. Obviously this is brought to you by Outlet Liquor, the place to buy a case. Make sure you get over there on Georgia Boulevard to buy a case, obviously, for the Sorrow Sabres games that you're going to have to endure for the rest of the season, or of course the remainder of the Olympics. And Chris, again, thank you so much for coming on with us. We'd love to have you on again during draft time. We always love your insight, and you're always a fun guest to have on. So
yeah, well, my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
All right, you guys, this has been Two Goalies, One Mic, episode 85. You have a spectacular day, and go USA.